let me introduce you to today's prompt. It is 1872, and there is a chill in the air that has nothing to do with the autumn weather. In the village of Styria, women are vanishing without a trace, and rumors are swirling that they are being stalked by a female vampire. Soon enough, an American student named Carmilla arrives at a castle nearby to research folklore for her thesis. But when she meets the enigmatic Countess von Karnstein, she finds herself irresistibly drawn to the mysterious woman, a thirst that might just put her in danger. When it comes to vampires, stories about blood drinking, undead creatures of the night have been popular since the early 19th century, and some of those tales have been more shocking than others. Think of John Polidori's seminal work, The Vampire, which helped launch the craze by introducing the aristocratic Lord Ruth, or the very first Dracula novel, which introduced a brand new type of monster, one based on real-life rumors about Vlad the Imp. But none were perhaps more talked about than Karl Mayr and Richard Oswald's silent movie Nosferatu, a loose retelling of Dracula that changed the look of the genre forever. And yet these are all stories that are told from a heterosexual perspective. There's the monster, and there's the damsel in distress, or maybe the damsel who becomes a monster. The male gaze, as they say, is always the default, but occasionally we get stories where the perspective shifts. And in the 1970s, one filmmaker took things even further. Based on the cult classic novella Carmilla, director Peter Newbrook presents a tale of forbidden love, but not between man and woman. It is a lesbian vampire film ahead of its time, and one that shocked audiences with its controversial subject matter. So let us dive into everything you need to know about the story that inspired the world's first lesbian vampire film. Let's start with the source material. Carmilla is a novella written by Austrian author Shirley. It was originally published in book form in 1872 as part of a collection called Veiled Glories and Other Tales. This is actually quite fitting, because much of the story is shrouded in mystery and ambiguity. It centers around a young woman named Laura Trevelyan, who lives in Styria with her father and older brother. But after hearing disturbing reports of missing women, Laura's father decides to take extra precautions and hire a companion for his daughter. And that's when Carmilla arrives. The two quickly strike up a friendship, and before long, Laura begins to feel an undeniable attraction to her companion. They go riding, they walk in the woods, they dance together. But something is off about their relationship. Carmilla seems strangely familiar. She has strange marks on her neck, and she's never really seen in daylight. And then the dreams begin. Laura starts having unsettling visions of a tall, dark-haired woman draining the life out of a sleeping girl. Soon enough, Carmilla is accused of preying on women in the village. And when a local woman recognizes Carmilla as the dream demon, she goes to Laura's house to warn her and her family. But when they investigate, they find that Carmilla is nowhere to be found. And as the body count rises, Laura is convinced that her friend is behind it all. But what can she do? In many ways, the story feels like a reimagining of Dracula from the perspective of Mina Harker. Like Mina, Laura is drawn to the mysterious guest who arrives at her home. And like Mina, she soon realizes that there's something truly sinister about her. And while Mina ultimately becomes a victim of the titular character, Laura takes matters into her own hands and confronts Carmilla directly. The ending is a bit different. You see, upon confronting her friend, Laura discovers a secret passageway leading to a cellar filled with coffins. Each coffin represents a woman lost to Carmilla, each a victim of her dark powers. And as Laura descends into the pit, she finds Carmilla in her final form, a monstrous creature of the night who has preyed on women for centuries. And so Laura does what needs to be done. She stakes Carmilla through the heart, ending her reign of terror once and for all. While the story was well received by some critics, it also attracted controversy. You see, homosexuality was still taboo at the time, and while Carmilla isn't explicitly gay, the chemistry between her and Laura is undeniable. Even in the original text, there's a clear romantic subtext to their relationship. So when it was adapted for the screen, audiences were in for a real treat. Let's talk about the film now, shall we? In 1968, a group of Austrian filmmakers set out to adapt the novella for the big screen. Producer Harry Alan Towers purchased the rights to the story and brought director Peter Newbrook onto the project. But they had a problem. While the source material was undeniably controversial, the budget for the film was relatively low, and if they wanted to secure funding, they needed to tone down the source material a bit. So rather than focusing on the relationship between Carmilla and Laura, they shifted the focus to a pair of characters named Annie and Sarah. and instead of outright stating that Annie is a vampire, the film implies that she might be a victim of a rare genetic disorder that causes skin lesions and severe sensitivity to sunlight. As a result, the film never explicitly states that Annie and Sarah are lovers. Instead, it focuses on the way that their friendship develops into something more, something that tragically turns violent. The movie follows a similar plot to the original story. Annie and Sarah become close friends. But soon enough, rumors start circulating about the strange activities happening at her house. People start to go missing, and suspicion falls on Annie. But despite the evidence against her, Sarah is determined to help her friend after a traumatic event. However, Annie moves away and the two drift apart. But when Sarah hears that a former acquaintance of Annie's is dead, she knows that she must confront her friend once again. The rest of the film focuses on the aftermath. What happens next is pure lesbian vampire horror gold. It features stunning cinematography, incredible performances, and a soundtrack that will stick with you long after the credits roll. But as I said, the film never explicitly states that Annie and Sarah are lovers. In fact, the word lesbian isn't even uttered in the entire film. And that was by design. See, in order to get funding for the film, the crew had to walk a fine line. They couldn't make the film too graphic or too in your face. And so they opted for subtlety. Instead of showing us that Annie and Sarah are lovers, they show us how their friendship develops into something more. We see them embrace, kiss, and sleep in the same bed. But there's never a definitive moment that says, yes, these two are lovers. It's up to the audience to decide. And that kind of ambiguity allowed the film to slip under the radar of the censors. And while it did receive some criticism, especially for its violence, it also became a cult classic. The performances are fantastic and the direction is masterful. And even though the film is technically a horror movie, there are elements of other genres at play. There's the romance, sure, but also a bit of mystery and even some comedy. And while it's obviously indebted to the source material, the screenplay by Josepha Macau and Pierre M. Fust brings something unique to the table. It avoids some of the pitfalls of the original story, namely the sometimes problematic portrayal of gender roles, and it replaces them with a strong central romance. When it comes to the lesbian vampire genre, this film is a trailblazer. It paved the way for future filmmakers to explore themes of sexuality in ways that had never been done before. And while it might not be the most accurate representation of either the vampire or the lesbian experience, it's still an important piece of history. If you want to watch it for yourself, unfortunately, it's a bit difficult to track down a copy of the film. It is not available on any major streaming platforms, and there haven't been any official releases in some time, but that hasn't stopped people from talking about it. Over the years, it has inspired countless other works of fiction and non-fiction and has been praised by critics and audiences alike. If you can track down a copy, I highly recommend giving it a watch. It's a classic for a reason. Sadly, the director Peter Newbrook passed away back in 2021, but his legacy lives on in the films that he made, especially this one. If you enjoyed the content today, please remember to leave a like. I'll catch you next time.